Lando Norris to Mercedes? This video is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Now at first this might seem far-fetched, but in actuality I don't think it is. Lando Norris is arguably one of the best drivers on the current Formula 1 grid. So what if one of the drivers with the most potential joined one of the most successful F1 teams in recent history? Obviously Mercedes currently has Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, and George Russell, the youngster hoping to take over from Hamilton from when he retires, and lead the team to future glory, which they seem to be struggling with at the moment. But what about Lando Norris? He's at McLaren right now, and I don't think he's going to be too happy staying there. So what if he joined Mercedes? I'm sure quite a few people would be interested in replacing Lewis Hamilton at the works team, but I'm pretty sure Lando Norris is quite high up on that list. So is Lando Norris the best option to replace Lewis Hamilton when he retires? Because let's be real, he's approaching 40 and is the second oldest driver on the grid. I know it doesn't seem like it. To be fair, I think Sebastian Vettel was like 10 years older than him, but he's younger, it just doesn't make sense. And like I said, there's a plethora of drivers who would love to replace him. The likes of Pierre Gasly comes to mind, or Nick de Vries if he gets a seat at Williams next season, which I'm sure he will. But I think Lando is the best candidate, and let me tell you why. The likes of Pierre Gasly is a good driver, but in this current generation of F1 cars, he hasn't shown that he's any good. It's all well and good that he can drive well in the previous generation's cars, but this car is the future of Formula 1, and you better be competitive in it right now. I think his best finish this year has been like P5 in Baku. Obviously had a pretty abysmal Red Bull campaign and is now stuck in AlphaTauri and looks like he's going to Alpine, so I think he'll stay there for a while. Whereas Lando's shown that he has pace and he can compete against his race-winning teammate in Daniel Ricciardo, who I'll touch upon later. And Lando is still extremely young and probably yet to be in his prime if he's given the right car. And let's not forget, when Lando and Lewis were battling, Lewis said on the radio that Lando is such a great driver. So if Lewis Hamilton said that, you must be pretty good, right? Now onto McLaren, the team that gave Lando Norris a chance to get into Formula 1 in the first place. Will he abandon them? I think so. Let's be honest, the McLaren car isn't great this season. And with Lando having a contract with him until 2025, it could be a rough few years for him. But he probably has a clause in his contract which means he can probably leave. I mean, look at Daniel Ricciardo. He's meant to be driving for McLaren next season, but he's going to somewhere like Mercedes as a reserve driver. I don't know. I'm going to see. But on the topic of Daniel Ricciardo and the McLaren car, I think we need to talk about that in general. That McLaren car, I think, is pretty bad. So I think Daniel Ricciardo is actually performing pretty well for where the car is. It's just really hard to judge where it is, because you have races like the Netherlands where the car is terrible and Daniel Ricciardo gets like P17. And we have races where Imola, like Lando gets a P3, and which what? So I really think that Lando is just seriously outperforming that car. Yes, Daniel probably isn't the happiest with it because he doesn't quite understand that car, but I still think Lando is just so much better in this car. And that's what the team needs. A driver who is good right now in this generation, or until at least 2026 when the engines change. So my theory with McLaren is I think the car is like as bad as it was in Bahrain. It's just the fact that Lando is so quick and has so much pace he can outperform it, whereas Daniel is performing where he probably should be and where the car deserves to be. But that's my theory. What do you think? So if McLaren don't get on top of this in the next couple of seasons, I see Lando Norris leaving McLaren. He's probably going to follow in Lewis Hamilton's footsteps. Think about it. Lewis started in McLaren, won a world championship. Obviously Lando won't, I don't think so, but he'll move to Mercedes like Lewis did. But then he'll also follow in Lewis's footsteps into the rivalry point of view. But here's the thing Mercedes have to take into account. Lando Norris and George Russell. Obviously they're both friends. They came up in karting together. There's loads of photos of them growing up. Quite funny actually. And obviously Lando and George competing against each other in F2. George ultimately came out on top, but Lando was in P2 not far behind. So could we see a repeat of 2016? Rosberg Hamilton, George Russell, Lando Norris. I think the team's pretty happy with having a number 1 and number 2 driver, right? Although saying that, it's kind of hard to tell who is number 1 and who's number 2 because George Russell is outperforming Hamilton. But I think it would really work with Valtteri Bottas. So if they choose Lando, will George be the favourite or Lando? It's tough to say really, but I think it'll be George. Or Mercedes could take the alternate route and hire Nick de Vries, who would probably be like Bottas. Obviously he did win the F2 title, but it's on his like 4th attempt, 3rd attempt, and he's also pretty old. So if he's only a rookie at 27, 28 years old, still has a lot of developing to do. So I think George will probably lead the charge at Mercedes and Nick de Vries could follow behind, or it could be Lando Norris. Now before I continue, let me talk to you a little bit about ExpressVPN. I'm sure most of you know what a VPN is, but in case you don't, let me tell you what it is. A VPN, or a virtual private network, makes the websites you visit think you're somewhere else. For example, I can use ExpressVPN to connect to American servers. There are loads of benefits to doing this. For example, it encrypts your data by funneling it through ExpressVPN's private servers. Isn't that great? It's so easy for someone to just get your data if you use public Wi-Fi. So make sure you use ExpressVPN. And did you know, platforms like Netflix actually lock content and hide it away from you? If I switch over to American Netflix, or Japanese Netflix, or Canadian Netflix, I have a whole new library of things to watch. So when you get ExpressVPN, make sure you connect to all the different servers to see all the content you can unlock. And when you do that, make sure you use my code CarsO'Connor with the link below. And if you do that, you'll get 3 months free. What a deal. So be sure to do that. Now onto McLaren and who could replace Lando at that team. Well, here's what I think. The thing with McLaren is they don't really have a young driver program with anyone knocking on the door. Right? Obviously, they have Colton Herta who's looking to go to an AlphaTauri seat, but I don't think that's going to happen. So maybe if they get that sorted and they can get super license, maybe he'll come over to McLaren because he did test with them, of course. And the only young drivers they have is Ugo Chuck, I think his name is. He's currently in F4, so I don't think he'll be in Formula 1 by the time this all kicks off. I think we can rule him out of the picture, but I think one person who could move up is Alex Albon. Of course, he's somewhat recovering from his damaged reputation at Red Bull and currently trying to rebuild his reputation at Williams. And he's doing pretty well, of course, scoring points for the team, whereas Nicholas Latifi isn't. He seems to be really outperforming where that car is. And I think he's the perfect driver for McLaren. Right now, McLaren seems to be top of the midfield. And that seems to be where Alex Albon was comfortable and where he was actually putting a Red Bull car. Obviously, he'd be able to capitalise on any misfortune of the top teams and be able to get maybe a podium here or there. And I think he'd be a good partner for Oscar Piastri, who'd probably lead the team. Once again, I don't think he's as good as Oscar Piastri, so maybe he could be like a little wingman. But in like midfield teams, number 1 and number 2 drivers don't really matter. But who do you think could replace Lando at McLaren if he leaves for Mercedes? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out this one right here about Ferrari and Mattia Binotto, about how bad he is. Oh, he's so bad. Just click it now. Go on. Right here. You know you want it.